Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Prahran Square Q&A event for Melbourne Open House 2020. My name is Madelyn Eads-Dorsey, and I am a project manager with AECOM, and I was the project manager for the Prahran Square project, and I'll be the host for today's event. First of all, in the spirit of reconciliation, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. A few housekeeping items. We're presenting in a webinar format, so you will automatically be on mute. We've already received a few questions, which the panelists will answer during this session, but if you have any more questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer them towards the end. This is also recorded, so it will be available afterwards to view. And if you want to share anything on social media, please tag City of Stonnington, Lyons, Aspect Studios, and Open House Melbourne. The hashtags we encourage you to use today are Open House Melbourne 2020, Your Virtual City, and Prahran Square. And if you haven't already, please be sure to watch Adrian Stanic's speaker series video after this event, which is available on YouTube. So on the panel today, we have Adrian Stanic. Adrian is a director at Lyons and a Prahran resident. He was the architectural design lead for Prahran Square. And we also have Kirsten Bauer, a director at Aspect Studios. Kirsten was the landscape design lead for Prahran Square. And we have Rick Kwasek, who is the director of environment infrastructure at the City of Stonnington. Rick was the client lead for Prahran Square. Rick, I'll ask you the first question. What is the council's history with the site and how was the project conceived?
Sure, thanks Madelyn. The site itself, the car park, was actually established as a car park back in 1966, and it was established with the assistance of the surrounding traders, and they contributed to the cost of the car park. And it's been a car park for a number of years. And for about the last 10 or so years, the idea of converting that space into open space has been kicked around council. And probably it's been since about 2014 when we undertook the first feasibility that it was established that we'd be able to turn the space into open space. The idea has really been driven by the fact that the western part of the municipality specifically is the densest part of Stonnington, and with Stonnington having the second lowest amount of open space per capita in Victoria for municipalities, it's critical that we maintain our open space, and in an area that's increasing in density year on year with a potential increase of up to 30,000 over the next decade. There's a real need for open space to maintain that level of livability and opportunity for local residents to actually use it as their backyard. So it's vitally important. We then went into a process of feasibility and evaluation, and around 2015 undertook the first engineering feasibility which indicated that it was a viable opportunity to put the car park below ground. And then we went into a process of engaging architects and designers and project managers to push the project forward. I guess probably the key thing to identify is that a project like this, which spans a number of years, really requires the support and of councillors. I mean, they need to make the courageous decision to actually commit council funds moving forward over a number of years. And it's really that foresight of the councillors to drive a project like this through a number of council cycles that really enable it to occur.
And the financial side of things, I mean, the council could have sold that piece of land and made money off of it. But what was politically did it work out that you were able to secure it for future public space?
Well, it was actually always used for municipal purposes, being the car park at the time, and now it's still a car park. So the site itself hasn't changed in its use, except for the fact that now it creates this magnificent urban parkland which is vital for the local area.
Adrian, as a Prahran resident, had you thought about how this space could have been improved upon? And when you were given the opportunity to develop the design for the competition, what was your first thought and how did it come to be?
Yeah, I guess, I've had very many years to sort of think about that space as a lot of people in Prahran have. We felt very fortunate to be given an opportunity to participate in the competition. And from our perspective, we really felt that the need was really a project that was essentially for the community. So it was a project which would celebrate public space. And we thought it was really important that it was a project that wasn't about a retail proposition, and it wasn't a proposition in any way by the council to make revenue. Revenue is made from the project, but that was not a driver for the project. It was a really important aspect. And from our perspective, we really saw it as an opportunity to create a series of diverse experiences on what is actually an incredibly large piece of land. We often compare the size of the land area to Federation Square, and it's actually bigger. So the project really required sort of a number of strategies to deal with the very large area. And we thought about really dividing it up into a series of experiences. And one of those experiences was the idea of creating a central square, a multimodal space that was capable of large and small scale of events, but also not only having a sort of a formal mode, but having informal modes where people could experience terraces, real grass, perhaps a rock garden, a sensory garden, and other spaces within the square. Was all going to be really important. And we thought that the idea of integrating public art into the square would also be a really important way of engaging the community within the square. And I guess Prahran is a very flat topography. We're also quite interested in the idea of introducing elevation in the square, the opportunity for people to actually rise up and experience Prahran from different perspectives. So the elevation on each of the wings provides that opportunity, which is quite unique in a space like that. We also thought that being a large space, we wanted it to be a sanctuary, a place that was excluded cars, not only physically but visually from the space. So there was a real sense of it being a space for humans and of course their pets. And this was also a really important idea in the way we designed the square. And I think the other aspect was, as Rick pointed to, the idea of providing a high quality car park, a car park that was safe for the community and provided access into all the precincts around.
And Kirsten, a lot of people are always amazed by how the landscape is thriving on top of a suspended slab. I don't know if we can share some images of that for people that haven't seen, but I'm just curious, what is the landscape design considerations that have enabled this?
It's a good question, and Madelyn, you can probably answer some of that yourself. I think maybe first someone should explain what a suspended slab is. I think there'll be a lot of people online going, what do you mean by a suspended slab? Sounds like it's been held up by air hooks or something. So
Well, I
There
guess
we go.
it sort of
Madelyn,
is.
what's a suspended slab?
Slab that's not on terra firma, not on ground.
Yeah. And I think that's what I found. I've been working with the council for many years on open space strategies, working with them on increasing their open space, working on a few projects with them as well. And the one thing that came out of that whole study within their open space strategies and that is that because of the densities increasing, the opportunities of finding open space is becoming harder. The cost to council and the community to go and buy a couple of properties to turn into an open space is sometimes quite constrained. So the council, has been looking for many years for smart opportunities to generate more open space for the community. And in a way, they're like many other inner city councils and country cities who have, in a sense, gone down the way of going, well, we need to make more from our land than we did before. So here's, in a sense, a great exemplar of that, of creating a car park, which is a requirement, a need for this community, putting a square on top and then a park on a square, if you will, on a suspended slab. So it's like saying we can use the whole depth of the site to create opportunities and benefits for the community. That's a long-winded answer, but it's kind of like saying where, it is a suspended slab, but that's come from a need to increase the opportunities of open space in these denser environments. And sometimes that's all we have now is to use car parks. It's something City of Melbourne's been looking into as well. So learning how to put a landscape on top of a suspended slab is pretty critical because it has to perform. And the sort of the landscape agricultural industry for about the last 5 years or 10 years has really come up with some great new technology and systems to ensure that those trees remain healthy for 20 plus years. So sorry, I just wanted to set that up as in that it's something the whole industry has been working towards to ensure that we can create these types of spaces and that they're healthy for a long, long time. So,
I'm just looking at the image on the screen actually, and you can see the empty rooftop car park right next to this.
So that's right. What are you doing? It's not doing much.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so in a sense, the podium planting, we call it, started off probably in the 80s when, the high-rise building started in South Bank, and everyone said, "Can we put a garden on top of the car park, on top of the sky, on top of the skyscraper?" And that's where a lot of it started. And now we're able to perform great, horticultural feats, if you will, on these types of concrete ground. And that's a combination of different soil types, lots of engineering around soils, and lots of engineering around different drainage systems, and pretty much a full collaboration between engineers, architects, landscape architects, horticulturalists to get it right,
Some people still question why the council didn't just build a grassy park with lots of trees.
Well, I think Adrian and Rick have answered that quite well. You could do that, but then you wouldn't get a car park. Or you could do that, but then then the question comes in as in looking at, I've looked at all of Stonnington's open spaces, and they have a plethora of good quality parks. And you have to start thinking about public realm as not just a green park. There are many other types of needs the community have beyond great green parks. I love green parks, I think they're amazing, but it doesn't mean every site has to have that. Not every site, that is the answer for that particular site. And here, I think this has been going on for 10 years. The strategy was to create a village precinct around Prahran. And people have seen the work that's happening at Greville Street, and all the laneway closures and revamping the laneways. So this is an urban heart, and it's got 2 parks, as Rick said. So it needed, a sort of an urban public realm. And it's about hooking into all the shared urban spaces and streetscapes. So it's like the crown in this broader urban precinct development. So you can't see it in isolation, I suppose. It's trying to do many things.
Yeah, and in terms of the architect's vision for how people are using the space, is the public using it as you imagined?
Well, it's an interesting question now in these COVID-19 times. I mean, I can speak anecdotally about it, and also just speaking to Rick about this. It appears that people are really engaging with the square. They're using it in different ways, which was always intended. I mean, people are using the grass, they're using the forest, they're using the sensory garden, and even though there's not a cafe there at the moment, it's very well used. People are bringing their lunches and sitting there and enjoying the space. So I'd say it's working from very many perspectives, and I think this video now on screen illustrates, excuse me, one of the more important aspects of the scheme, in the sense that there is a diagonal pedestrian line across the site, or connecting each of the corners of the site. And these diagonal pedestrian lines actually weave the project into the fabric of Prahran. They're actually really important in the way they connect the surrounding precinct into the square. And even when there's not many people using the square, would be it late at night or early in the morning, there are times when people are just walking through the space on the diagonal. It just facilitates a really safe passage through Prahran and creates a really strong sense of connection throughout the precinct. So that's been a really important, I guess, functional aspect of the way the square works. But I think in terms of people using the seating, using the terraces and the grass, I mean, there's often people on the grass with their pets, their dogs running around, people walking up and down around the forest area, on the pavement areas, and the fact that there's accessible spaces for everyone in this square is really important. So, for example, you're looking at the grass area at the moment, or the lawn, and you can see there's lots of opportunities for people actually just to walk up onto the lawn, but there's also ramps for people who are not able to use the stairs to access the lawn. There are ramps to provide access to the lower areas of the terrace, and also there's a lift to provide people access to the top area of the terrace as well. So we've attempted to provide access to as many people as possible to the widest cross section of the community throughout all of the park, and that was a really important goal in the way the project was designed. And of course, you know, the idea that the square is for all ages, as well as for all aspects of the community, all cultures, and we're really seeing, you know, I can say that I definitely see that on a daily basis, be it you know, at night or in the middle of the day. There are lots of different people using the square, which is a real excuse me, a real joy to see.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of time and effort went into thinking about the natural and organic use of the space, and just as much time went into the sort of planned use of the space. Rick, do you want to talk a bit about the council's vision for hosting events and how that looks now and into the future? Oh, you're on mute.
The square was designed with the purpose of being able to host events, from small sort of intimate events right up to events that would potentially hold around 5,000 people. Unfortunately, now in this COVID environment, obviously all the event program has been put on hold, but certainly what we've seen in recent times, and Kirsten touched on this earlier, is that the way people have been using the space has been very much like their backyard. A lot of the population of Prahran and South Yarra live in small apartments and therefore have very little space within their own apartments. And this really provides that opportunity for them to spill out into this space and to use it as a backyard just to read a book or to work on the computer on the public Wi-Fi. What I've found, and this is, at the times when I've actually been through the square, is that walking through from Greville Street through Grattan Gardens and into the square, you can see that there are a few people scattered through Grattan Gardens, and when you get to the square, you get significantly more people because they sort of tend to spread into the various spaces on the terraces and within the forest and on the lawns. Being able to actually be within their own space within a larger space, if that makes sense. But the square itself was actually designed for, being able to host events such as carols or smaller, sort of more intimate there's within the terraces, there's almost like little stage areas. And there was a modelling done on various opportunities, to be able to actually run a myriad of events. The image on the screen now shows, the various types of opportunities, to hold ice skating and moonlight cinema. A screen wasn't actually installed into the square because it was seen as occupying too much of the open space and too much of a sight line. But it can easily be wheeled in. The square was designed to be able to cope with having large semi-trailers, being able to bump in equipment and facilities to be able to run large events. Adrian, you might want to sort of jump in here and talk about some of the modelling.
Yeah, I think, we worked quite hard with council to understand exactly what they wanted to do in the square, and it was a very sort of open brief in terms of all the possibilities. We went through a very detailed analysis of understanding all the typologies of use for the space. And as Rick said, there was a lot of work to actually establish the correct infrastructure for those typologies of use. So we were essentially looking at a square that needed the capability of allowing very heavy loads to be emitted on the suspended slab, so trucks to be able to actually drive in so that they could set up for large-scale events. So the structure needed to cope with that. We needed to provide portals within the plaza area of the square, or the central square area, such that we could deliver power and data to certain points around the square. And these considerations all had to be made with all the regular concerns around maintenance and durability, etc., for the square, and also accessibility, so we weren't interrupting people's access of the square.
So a genuine question, does the group believe that the way the square is being used at the moment is a success? And I guess, Rick specifically, how is council measuring if it is a success? Also, Adrian, I'll just start with you if you think project is a success.
I think for us, seeing people use the square as they are now in these quite constrained times is very encouraging, and as I said earlier, it's a real joy to see people using the square in different ways. Only yesterday I was there, and there were people that had brought their own gym equipment onto the terrace, and they were using that to do their exercise on the terrace. And you see it often in the forest and other areas of the square. I think the community speaking through its use of the square is one of the greatest affirmations of its success, and I think that will continue into the future as people, make the square their own and learn to use it in their own way. Everyone will experience the square differently and have a different perspective on the square. But I think in time, that will grow as people discover the square. I mean, there are lots of people that still haven't discovered the square, and are still sort of learning about all the facets of the square, be it the car park and all the other features of the square. And I think also in time, other things that will support that will be, the introduction of the various retail opportunities that exist around the square at the moment that haven't been activated because of the times we're in. And I think that will only serve to enhance the experience of the square as well. So from my perspective, it's looking very encouraging in terms of, the way people are using the square and developing a kind of attitude to using it.
Kirsten?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think from a landscape architecture perspective, we work obviously in lots of public projects and outdoor public projects. And we always talk, when we talk about success with clients and the community, generally it's over many years. It's rare to have, a large public open space which requires growth of trees to create more shade. That requires programming from council and the community because it's designed to be activated by people through programs and festivals and things. So those things, and even the retail thing that Adrian's talking about will take many years. So success is something which shifts every now and then. Some people believed Federation Square wouldn't be a success. It became a success. And some people still don't like Federation Square, but still use Federation Square. There's so many different forms of what we mean by success. If we're talking about daily use success, Adrian's pretty much already described it. It is successful on a daily thing. If it's successful in holding events, it's only had one or two. It will take some years and some programming to get the right type of festivals and events to work in the square. In terms of success, in terms of providing that lush growth and shade that people would like to have, that will take some years to grow. Because we had to make a call of we could put more trees in, but that would mean they wouldn't grow as high and as well. So we made the decision to put less, to optimise their future growth rather than their immediate growth. So for us, we were looking at success in 5+ years because that, if the trees are growing in 5+ years, that's a success.
Yeah, I remember that. It was also a cost decision, how many mature trees do we plant now and how many semi-mature.
Right.
And
yeah. And the smaller the tree are, the more they adapt to the environment and the conditions and the more stronger they become. So that's something else we have to factor in. So success is multi-layered, I think. And all great parks and all great squares generally have immediate success, and then its place in the community's the love of the square, the memory of the square, how it becomes integral to the community does take many years. Federation Square took so many years before it was embraced by the Melburnians.
Rick?
Thanks, Kirsten, Madelyn. I think also we can't forget that the square is also a car park, a 500-space car park. We have the car park steadily increasing in usage now, with usage up to sort of 60 to 70% at peak times. So in itself, the car park is building usage, and therefore I would see that as a success. Obviously, in this sort of difficult time, it's difficult to gauge, how that will be in a normal environment. But certainly, it's been successful, and it's, as a car park, it's right out there in terms of being unique. It has those connections to the ground plates. It's a really great space, I think, for a below ground car park to actually operate, in a really sort of open environment, so to speak. I think the way council is measuring success, obviously footfall and the amount of people that are actually using the space is a measure of success. And we are setting up cameras to enable us to actually have pedestrian counts to gauge that level of usage. But certainly anecdotally at this stage, you can see that the square is being used by local residents. There are people crossing that square. If you stand in the square for half an hour and watch the movement of pedestrians, they're going back and forth across the square. Some of them, sit there and eat their lunch. It's being used as we expect it to be used. It's acting as the backyard of the local residents within Prahran and South Yarra. People park their car and go upstairs to go to the supermarkets. The supermarkets themselves, since the square was envisaged, have since redeveloped their stores, which is almost responding to the square itself. So I think it's a really positive sign that the square itself is actually activating the area around the square.
And I think, Rick, that's a good layer of another success is, I know some of the questions are talking about cost, but I suspect we would argue that we're looking at success in terms of financial success over many years. If there's a significant transformation of all the adjacent areas and there's an uplift in the value of those, that is also part of the overall value of the precinct, because this is about regenerating or developing the precinct. It's not just about the square.
And I guess there's other projects within the precinct that actually add to that. So Greville Street has recently been upgraded, and that's proven to be a huge success. And then with the development of the square and then the improvements in Princess Gardens, which is just to the east, all of those improvements add to the precinct as a whole. And if you add them all together, it creates a magnificent precinct for a sort of steadily increasing and significantly dense community. That's only becoming more densely populated as the years go by.
And council is wasn't just thinking wasn't thinking 5-10 years in the future. I mean, this is a 50-year vision. Can you talk a bit about how the car park has been thinking about the future and future-proofed?
So there are a number of design elements within the car park that has allowed for future-proofing. So the first level of the car park has actually been designed with a higher floor-to-ceiling level to enable it to be repurposed should the usage of cars change into the future. This provides for the potential to repurpose the space into whatever that might be in 15, 20 years. So that height difference allows it to be repurposed, and maybe Adrian might want to jump in here with some of the thinking around that.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I think look, it was identified early on that flexibility in that car park was going to be an important consideration, particularly for long-term adaptive reuse. So, I mean, we did a number of studies to understand what the spatial needs would be for the servicing of different kind of spaces within the car park should the car park be adaptively reused. And we came up with obviously having to work with budgets, we came up with a dimension of 3 metres for the lowest point of the structure to enable servicing, etc., to a 2700 high ceiling or otherwise throughout that space. Now, that was a very nominal idea, and it was really based on the concept that into the future, the structure may in fact be changed substantially. There may in fact be openings cut into the car park or otherwise, and we're talking about 50 years later. So sort of radical changes to the structure. The idea was really to provide as much space that was economically feasible for the project and structurally viable throughout that space. But what has actually come of that is that the car park appears as an incredibly sort of generous space, particularly as it links with the outside through the glazed areas, and we felt that was a fantastic way of creating a really high amenity car park with a great sense of safety and passage.
Just on that, Adrian, we had a question come through from the audience asking about the level of safety and how some people think it's not safe. There's homeless people there, but there was a lot of thinking and design that went into making it feel safe, both below ground and above ground. Can you answer that question?
Yeah, sure. So I will add that council have security around the clock in the square. So there is security monitoring around the square. So that's around the clock anyway. But regardless of that, the project was designed to safety concepts, crime prevention through environmental design is called CEPTED. And this analysis was used for the design of the project. And we analysed essentially every corner of the project. And that included the car park, it included all aspects of the square. And the analysis enabled us to identify any areas that were problematic. And this actually also was discussed in relation to the landscaping as well. And Kirsten can probably talk about this in terms of how we space the landscaping or the trees throughout the square in order to create a safe environment.
Kirsten, do you want to add to
that? I suppose definitely crime prevention through environmental design, and what we also call it is designing to reduce harm to people, and that's the most critical thing. And and this is sort of more of a personal professional opinion, not necessarily that safety is always critical, like it's always forefront of your mind. We designed the Caulfield to Dandenong rail level crossing removals, and that involved a whole series of long linear parks that people were highly concerned with safety. And like here and there, you work with police, you work with council, you work with security people, and there's all these things that you bring together to make it as safe as possible. But then there's always a limit. You can't. Where design unfortunately can't change basic cultural behaviour. We can, in terms of if people want to do harm, we do as much as possible to reduce that. And I think the square's been quite successful at doing that through various mechanisms. Some people probably wouldn't even recognise. They wouldn't realise that something's there because of that particular reason. And sorry, there was another question about trees. Was that? Sorry, I missed that one. Madelyn, was there another? Or was water?
Yeah, water and how if it's being captured. Yeah.
So the water's captured,
yeah.
Absolutely, and that's all used in the site. That's really important, absolutely. And then all the vegetation has a sort of an irrigation system to take that water back to irrigate the vegetation and the lawn and places like that. And that's important when you're on a suspended slab. when you're not on natural ground, that water requirement is pretty critical. Yeah, and
it's worth noting that the water collection actually comes directly off the main ground plane, which is a little bit unusual and actually requires additional filtration of the water and special treatment of the water to reuse that in irrigation. That was a decision that was made early in the project, but it obviously brings benefit in terms of what we can put back into the landscape.
We've got two questions about the cost of the project. I think I'll pose this to Rick, although I could probably help answer as well. But the budget, the initial budget of the project was, I believe, 40 million. It ended up being 60 million. Do you want to talk about where that increase came from, Rick?
So the original feasibility back in 2014, 2015 pretty much looked at a flat ground plane with a two-level car park below ground. Those costs came in at around $40 million. I guess if you take the costs associated with building that car park when it was built, the cost of the car park probably still cost around $40 million, and then the balance of the costs were associated with the actual landscape works above ground and the building works. There's probably
and
worth noting. Beg your pardon?
Streets.
Probably worth noting the streets themselves added to that cost. The project itself came in just over $60 million, and the streets added probably $6 or $7 million to the actual costs of the overall project. But I guess it's you can't really separate the streets themselves from the project because they actually intertwine and they interconnect at all of the levels. And at each of the corners, the projects or the square itself spills out into the streets. And converting Wattle Street to the north and Cato Street to the east into shared zones and pedestrian walkways was critical to how the square operates. And it was really about ensuring safe movement of pedestrians around the site and through the site. And that really gives the connectivity, to the market, to the, Grand Central, to the civic precinct. It connects to all of those areas really well. And ensuring the street design was designed correctly helps that to occur.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question. So we've had a question coming through about the challenges of collaboration engagement with the design and how you overcome those challenges as designers and as a council officer. So Rick, let's start with you.
So the engagement was challenging. We started engaging probably first of all when we developed the Chapel Street Master Plan years ago. And the master plan identified the square as a potential village square, or the site as a potential village square for the area. I guess trying to address the uniqueness of the space. About a year and a half prior to actually commencing works, we were engaging with the community around the area, with the traders. We had town hall meetings. We set up a Cato Square hub just opposite the site to enable, and that was manned once or twice a week to enable people to drop in and ask questions about the site. We engaged with some of the key stakeholders, with the larger stores and the smaller stores directly around, traders directly around the site. We had face-to-face meetings with each of those traders, and with the main stores, we met with the Prahran market. So there are a number of key stakeholders that we certainly met with, and it was a challenge for those traders and stakeholders to work or to maintain business throughout the construction. It was a significant impact on the area, that's without a doubt. However, if you look at the benefits now, and this is a generational project, it's one of those projects that you have to work through those challenges to try and get the outcome that's been achieved.
Kirsten or Adrian, anything to add to that?
Well, I'll add to it from a designer's perspective. From the outset, we set up a sort of a multidisciplinary team to address the competition. We developed a strong collaboration with Aspect with Kirsten's team, and essentially, it's really the way we do like to work on projects like this, is to approach it from an incredibly collaborative perspective. And from our point of view, the collaboration was incredibly successful. We were able to, sort of bring to this project a whole range of ideas that as practices that we've been developing through other projects as well. So it gave us the opportunity of bringing all of those ideas together, albeit in a very different format and a very different proposition for Prahran.
Yeah, I mean, collaboration is pretty critical in these projects. Like, they don't get very far without really good collaboration. You can tell when it's not really working well. And agree with what everyone's saying about collaboration. And the other thing of collaboration, we've been finding a lot of these types of projects, because they're from the ground, it's a car park, you have to create a ground, then you have to put a landscape on top and then another elements on top. It's such a three-dimensional collaboration as well, not just a conceptual collaboration. So the technology, we have to actually, we in a sense collaborate through 3D models now. Some people will call it Revit or BIM, all those types of things. And so in a sense, before you might collaborate, have a bit of an idea, and then you would go off and document it separately, or, have separate meetings. And now, obviously, these types of projects, the collaboration is happening all the time, and that is pretty critical to getting these projects to work well. And I know people talk about costs, but, without those processes, that's about trying to minimize the amount of cost in terms of, really making the details and the materials as efficient as possible to achieve what you want to achieve. It's like, so the roof of the car park is the base of the landscape. So those things have to be thought of as two things, and so, you're trying to get as much efficiencies in those processes as possible.
It was a real collaboration between your team and the engineers, getting all those levels right for drainage. And then also working with the access consultant of getting the gradients right so that it's within the DDA code. And
I mean, just getting that path on the forest to be DDA compliant took months, really. I think we went up to about 30 different options, collaborative with the engineers, the architects, with council, the DDA consultant, just to get the path to work well, so that everyone benefits from it. That is, a beautiful sort of outcome of collaboration. It means then people can enjoy it. Anyone can enjoy it, and that for us is the aim of that collaboration process.
And just to wrap up, if each of you want to say what your favorite sort of community outcome for the project is, Kirsten?
I think, I understand all the controversies and difficulties with these projects, and I think that's part of what these projects are, because they're not delivering the typical, and when you're not delivering the typical, it generates debate, which is a good thing. Our cities have to have this kind of conversation about what will our public spaces be in the future, who are we trying to design for, are we trying to repeat what we always do, are we trying to create new types of activities and forms and memories in our urban environment. And so for me, that's one of the benefits, is we're not resting on we're not resting on your laurels, but we're thinking about what the future community might be, as well as the current community. And that's a very good community benefit.
Rick?
Yeah, look, that vision for the future community, really that's the councillor's vision, to have a facility that provides amenity, the opportunity for social interaction, really sort of a high level of amenity in this area. is so important, and the councillor's vision to have that over a number of years and to drive that project is really so important. And the fact that we've been able to achieve that is probably the key element here. It's so difficult in a council environment to deliver these multi-year projects, and this is one that is clearly successful and will be into the future for generations. I mean, this is a generational project, and it requires the vision of councillors to be able to deliver projects like this. So to me, that's probably the key outcome of this project.
Adrian?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with everything Kirsten and Rick have said, and the fact that it is a space for the community is one of the most important aspects from my perspective. But let's not forget that also from my perspective, this used to look like that. It was a car park, and now it's an incredible piece of urban infrastructure that has had a incredibly transformative effect on the area. And I think the important thing, and we've all been talking about this, is that it will enable things to happen into the future. It'll be a catalyst for other things to happen into the future. The Dan Murphy site and the big store. There's a lot of things that can happen there in the future that will interact with Prahran Square, and I think, as I say, as people discover Prahran Square, it will evolve in the consciousness of the community as well.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Adrian, Kirsten, and Rick, and thank you all the audience participants, and thanks for sending in the questions. And thank you very much to Open House Melbourne for hosting this event. That's that. So,
Thanks,
signing
Madelyn.
off.
Thanks, Madelyn. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.